For today's episode of Here Today, Gone Tomorrow, we are doing a deep dive into the Film Foundation. If you don't already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button to never miss a video. We have daily content including film reviews and more. For this week's episode of Here Today, Gone Tomorrow, we are talking about the Film Foundation. Now, some of you might already know this is purely an amazing organization and that has really been doing the work of the film gods. If AMC is the church of Nicole Kidman, then the Film Foundation is the Vatican and Martin Scorsese is the Pope. The Film Foundation is a nonprofit organization established in 1990 dedicated to protecting and preserving motion picture history by working in partnership with archives and studios. The foundation has helped restore over 1,000 films, which are made accessible to the public through programming at festivals, museums, and educational institutions around the world. The Film Foundation's World Cinema Project has restored 67 films from 32 different countries, representing the rich diversity of world cinema. The Foundation's free educational curriculum, The Story of Movies, teaches young people, over 10 million to date, about film, language, and history. Now, a kind of brief backstory of the Film Foundation. I first kind of discovered this in my first time at film school. I actually did like a mini essay project on the Film Foundation and kind of the importance of film preservation, which was a pretty, I wouldn't say influence for this series, which again I originally wanted to make a documentary about, but it just kind of seemed a little far-fetched considering the dozens of people I reached out to who actually work within the industry, and even professors and people who work in museums of the modern art, Museum of Modern Art up in New York, and pretty much people who have a influence or great knowledge and can really interview and kind of talk with representation of the importance and kind of give insight to what they've seen, never got back to me. So this is kind of a docu-series, if you will, just talking about the importance of film preservation and kind of how it affects us today with physical media and just preserving film in general. Now, in 1990, jumped ahead a little bit. Martin Scorsese first reached out to his friends and fellow filmmakers and film lovers in 1980 to tell them what they were doing meant absolutely nothing because films were disappearing. And when he said that, it wasn't like in a way in which what they're doing for film preservation was nothing, because they weren't doing anything. He was really speaking out to, as filmmakers, making these films and doing these projects, it means nothing because films are constantly disappearing day by day, and everything we're doing will soon be gone as well, because film, again, for the longest time, was never looked at as an art form, but it was looked at as a pure business enterprise in which nobody ever preserved film or even tried to, make it anything that wasn't profitable. If it wasn't profitable, they weren't doing it. In 1990, with the help of fellow filmmakers and friends such as George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, and Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese started the Film Foundation. The film preservation movement started by Martin Scorsese and is now a passion shared by many people around the world, comprised in community by the fragile but beautiful thing known as cinema. And that's just a start. To date, the Film Foundation has already helped restore over 1,000 films, many of which are readily accessible to see today. And a big thing I always say with physical media being an important part of cinema history and really helping preserve that, and not only preserve cinema history, but also make it where films are accessible to people at any given time, because again, copyright laws and different things of that nature completely, debunk streaming and all these other online sources, because again, I know people say pirating. Oh, I can always watch it online. Pirating sites are constantly being taken down. They're constantly having issues with viruses and various other things, not to mention you're not going to get the best quality from a pirating site. And even if you are finding a site that has a decent quality to pirate films, you got to remember these sites are made to get viewership. A lot of times you're not going to find obscure films on these sites. It's mostly just movies of the week. When I say that, I mean like big Hollywood blockbusters that came out. Usually that's what's on those sites. again, you try to find a film from 1935 of, from a French filmmaker, I doubt you're going to find it on a popular piracy site, because again, those sites pretty much take already existing films and upload them. And again, like I said, those sites are constantly being taken down, constantly being, turned over and things of that nature. So you're not even, is it illegal and unethical, I guess you could say, to watch films in that context. I mean, as far as profitability goes, if you're watching a French film from 1935, chances are nobody's profiting off that movie anyway, because if you can't find it in existence, there's nobody is putting it out there for money to be made off of it. But again, physical media is the way to kind of preserve that and have it accessible for people to watch. From behind me, you can see the Criterion Collection, part of my Criterion Collection. There's quite a few Martin Scorsese World Cinema projects. I have 3 of the 4. I'm still missing one of the box sets to complete the collection. But these are films that are, from importance of around the world, are easily accessible and ready to watch in the highest possible quality and easily accessible, which is something, again, that physical media allows us to have. Because, yes, I have a Criterion channel, but films are constantly coming and going from that, as all streaming services. So, again, that's kind of the importance of physical media, because it helps preserve films that otherwise would not be preserved. And, a lot of titles that they help restore are some titles that you would never think to have even ever been in danger of going out of print and being lost forever. Such titles as Red Bull Without a Cause. Now, that's one of the films that the Film Foundation helped bring back to life, which is huge, but at the same time, it doesn't feel that way to an extent, because you would never think Red Bull Without a Cause will be a film on the verge of extinction. Like, I remember when I was 18 working at Walmart, Red Bull Without a Cause, you could find it in the $5 bin or off on the outskirts of the racks in their older film sections for like $5 or $7 or something like that, either $5 or $7.50. I want to say it was in the $5 bin, but it could have been in the $7.50 section of the movies. But again, that wasn't a film that was hard to come by or something that I really had to search for. I mean, again, it was right there on the shelf at a Walmart, which again just goes to show that they're doing this magical work in the background, making things like having a film that is as popular and well known as Red Bull Without a Cause, which is a huge film from the 50s. Even before going to film school, I knew of that film. I didn't see the film, but I knew of it. And, seeing it on the shelf, I was like kind of heard of it and kind of had a background knowledge of it. But again, it was just one of those titles that you never would have thought, or I would never have thought, was on the brink of extinction. You have a couple of other titles, such as One-Eyed Jacks, which was directed by Marlon Brando, which is actually part of the Criterion Collection. The Searchers with John Wayne, which I do remember from film class freshman year. We were talking about that, and one of the reasons why that film failed miserably in theaters in its initial run is because that was made during the time in which film was trying to compete with television, and they were trying to do bigger, bolder films. So they actually shot The Searchers on 70 millimeter film to make this grand experience, which nowadays being able to see films on bigger platforms such as IMAX, Dolby, and even 70 millimeter film is something people pay extra to do, and it's a huge deal. But back then, it failed not because it was too expensive to see, because there wasn't enough theaters to actually show the movie. Because like today, in order to show that movie in that platform, you had to have the right equipment. But it wasn't like today where, you could easily transfer a regular film and have it play in an IMAX theater or a Dolby theater and also have it run simultaneously on a standard screen. They shot it on 70 millimeter. Everything was 70 millimeter stock. So they didn't have enough theaters, weren't transitioned to actually screen the film. So it failed miserably. Not because it wasn't great, not because of anything short then. It just didn't have the opportunity in theaters to be seen because only a handful of theaters were able to actually show the film. Which, side note, is a huge issue, which I did a video on already, is a huge issue in today's cinema. Not that we don't have the capability of showing films because of the format they're filmed in, but because were not just a huge issue with films failing. It's not because they're not good or that they don't have the potential to be great or potential to be successful, I should say, not great. It's because we're not allowing audiences the time of day to see them because we're giving them such short theatrical runs, no marketing, or even just giving them a theatrical run, but only having maybe a week. Like there's a few films in which they only had a week in theaters, maybe 3 screenings a day. So it didn't have that opportunity to really even just really shine because they pulled it too soon and they didn't even give it the opportunity to be seen, which is relevance to the searchers, but kind of still a little off. Even Alfred Hitchcock's North by Northwest was a film that the Film Foundation helped restore. And again, it's just one of those films you would never expect to kind of be out of print or out of existence. Again, I remember growing up, Alfred Hitchcock was one of the filmmakers that it was like a household name that everybody knew. Even like before I was really into making film, big into film, Alfred Hitchcock was like this grand master of suspense. And he was someone that everybody kind of talked about when you talk about movies and thrillers. Like Hitchcock was like the golden standard. Like Hitchcock and Spielberg, I feel like everybody knew who they were, even if they weren't into movies or like deep into film. I feel like now, though, Hitchcock is not someone who is often spoken about in film circles, which I just find kind of strange, given today's film atmosphere. I never hear anybody talk about Hitchcock or really kind of praise his films like they did a decade ago or 15 years ago, so to speak. So I just think it was kind of odd. I think it's kind of odd they don't recognize his work. But kind of getting back to the point, which is the Film Foundation, Martin Scorsese did something great, and I feel like this is a organization, a nonprofit organization, who is doing strides for film, and there's so many great filmmakers who are a part of this journey to preserve film. And a lot when I tell you about some of the people who are involved in this program and that are chairman or on the board, I should say. Scorsese is the chairman of the organization. But when you talk about some of the filmmakers who are on the board, you're not going to be surprised to hear their name because of how not only influential they are in the industry, but how much they praise and talk about physical media, how much they praise the theatrical experience, and they really talk about their love of cinema. Now, one thing I kind of do want to kind of point out is that in the 90s, did you have the home video boom? And a time in which you would think it would be even more accessible to watch movies and get your hands on pretty much anything. Foreign films were even hard to get at the time, and you would have to really try hard to get these films. A lot of times they were bootlegs. You had to know someone or know someone who knew somebody to get these films to be able to see it. And of course, pre-internet era, it wasn't that easy. You couldn't just jump on eBay and buy a copy of a VHS from China or Japan or another foreign country, which really kind of made it a thing. Like I've heard stories of people who were telling, who were like in the video store era in the 90s and actually worked in the stores, and people would talk about, they'd pass around these like bootleg copies of Hard Boiled and The Killer and these John Woo films. And it was because of these bootlegs that they somehow got and were passing around and became, big in film circles, that, Woo became a underground kind of filmmaker in film circles here in America. And that's how he got his big break in America to do. I believe his first film here was Hard Target or Broken Arrow. Can't remember. It's one of the two. I want to say it was Hard Target, I think. But that's how he got his big break to come over to America to make films, was because of this underground film circles that were passing around as bootlegs. And again, you would think it'd be easy to get, but it's not like today where you can just jump on Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, or wherever and just start streaming films from all around the world. It was in 2007 when Martin Scorsese started the World Cinema Project, which was recognizing the urgent need to preserve, restore, and provide access to films from around the world. And to date, 67 films from Africa, Asia, Eastern Europe, Central America, South America, and the Middle East have been restored, preserved, and exhibited for global audiences. As part of the WCP, the African Film Heritage Project was launched in 2017 in partnership with the Pan-African Federation of Filmmakers in collaboration with Cineta di Bonola. to preserve the legacy of African cinema. The WCP also support restoration film schools, intense resulting-oriented workshops, allowing students and professionals to learn the art and science of film restoration and preservation, which I think is a huge thing because we're now teaching the trade around the world on not only the importance, but on how to preserve film and how to store it properly. Because, again, from what I've been told and from what I've did in my research, I don't have any hands-on experience, so to speak, but film celluloid is the best possible way to preserve films because of its just overall nature. Like, digital is not the best way to do it. It's not the most secure. Film celluloid is the best long-term solution to preserving films, and a big part of that is proper respiration and proper preservation, which is storing. And it also it's very costly because you have to store the films in the right temperature, in the right climate, and it's a lot of upkeep too as well because you not constantly, but you do have to transfer the celluloid films from multiple reels because over time film does degrade. Again, if without proper respiration and proper storage, it can fade quicker or it can dissolve faster. Because Vinegar syndrome is actually the chemical in which the celluloid gives off, which causes it to degrade and break down over time. I'm going to take a minute before we wrap up and talk about the filmmakers who are members of the board on this phenomenal organization. Just to kind of point out that it's not just old movies and historic films that the foundation has preserved and restored. It's films that came out as late as the 1990s, in which films have been restored and preserved by the foundation. And there's films like Fall of Otor, which was a 92 film, I believe, that was restored and preserved by the Film Foundation due to its poor initial reels not being properly kept up with, and there not being a good copy in existence. They restored the film and now preserved it, so it's not just old historic films. There's actually newer films as early as the 1990s that have been restored thanks to the Film Foundation. And I just kind of want to take a moment to honor all of those who are part of the board of the Film Foundation that really helps Scorsese in making this a thing, and also just kind of helping preserve the thing that we all know and love, cinema. And those individuals include Woody Allen, Wes Anderson, Steven Spielberg, Spike Lee, Sophie Coppola, Robert Redford, Peter Jackson, Paul Thomas Anderson, Lena Ramsey, Catherine Bigelow, Jonah Hogg, Guillermo del Toro, George Lucas, Francis Ford Coppola, Clint Eastwood, Barry Jenkins, Christopher Nolan, Ang Lee, Alexander Payne, and of course, Martin Scorsese himself. So you have some of the greatest filmmakers working today being part of this phenomenal organization, and that pride themselves on the preservation and restoration of films. I think the Film Foundation is probably one of the most important organizations or nonprofit organizations working in film preservation today. There's a lot of for-profit organizations that also help the cause of film preservation just by restoring and bringing to life films that would have otherwise been lost. But they are, again, of course, profitable organizations that preserve and restore old films to then sell on physical media. A lot of boutique labels, which as collectors, we love our boutique film labels, which we will be covering on the series and kind of doing a deep dive into some of those, as well as how they got started, what kind of films they preserved and brought back into print and into circulation, films that even some organizations or some boutique labels even saved from the cutting room floor. So as always, thanks for watching. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already to never miss an episode.